Hello, everyone, and welcome into the ninth episode of Jack's Mailbag, the series where I answer your Gamecock baseball and other sport questions. If you have a question you want answered on next week's episode, be sure to drop it in the comments section below on this video, or I'll have a thread on the Gamecock Central Insiders Forum where you can drop all your questions there. So it's been a busy week for baseball. South Carolina plays Texas A&M in a three-game series starting later tonight at 7 p.m. on the SEC Network Plus. And it should be a big series. I got a few baseball questions to answer, as well as some other questions. So without further ado, let's get into it with our first question from Hopkins Cock 56. Jack, thank you for your excellent reporting work you do. What is the portal window for men's and women's, if you know, hoops for non-graduate students? When do they have to enter the portal by, and how long do they have to decide? Also, are we going to see any more Gamecock men's hoops players enter the portal? Thank you, sir. So I did a little bit of digging on this, and it would seem the portal opens so it's open for 45 days right off the bat, and it opens the Monday after Selection Sunday, which Selection Sunday was a few weeks ago, probably about 2.5 weeks ago now, maybe. So I think this Sunday will mark 3 weeks since then. So however many days after that is when the portal's open till. So it doesn't feel like a lot of time, all things considered, but at the same time, it could be less days, and that's enough. I think maybe it isn't enough time for these athletes to go ahead and make a decision about their futures. I mean, we've already seen dozens of basketball players and at the college level, already transferring to other schools. We've seen Michi Johnson, for instance, already enter the portal and find a new home at Ohio State. So there's that. Are we going to see any more Gamecocks enter the portal from the men's basketball side of things? Well, as of right now, I don't think so. I think we're good. I think fans are good on this. Zach Davis, he's coming back next year. Jacoby Wright is coming back next year. Miles Studi, unless something changes, is coming back next year. And the latest domino to fall and come back for South Carolina is freshman forward from last year, Colin Boyles, who just signed a deal with Garner Trust. So those guys are all coming back. That's pretty good. South Carolina hasn't gotten anyone out of the portal yet. I do fully expect them to get at least a few guys to kind of replenish what they lost. I mean, they are losing 3 starters after all. You're losing Talon Cooper, BJ Mack, and Michi Johnson. So you got to replace 3 starters somehow. I mean, you could have guys, like Jacoby Wright and Miles Studi fill those voids. But at the same time, I think you also want some new blood in there to maybe compete for those spots. So I hope that answers your question. But next question comes from Eddie J 1956, who asks, seems that there's a small amount of heat under Mark Kingston's seat this year. What results from the season keep him and what could send him packing? So, a lot of people seem to want Mark Kingston to be fired, gone, whatever. And look, as a baseball fan in general, outside of covering South Carolina here, I get it. There are times as a Yankee fan, after all, happy opening day to those that celebrate, specifically for, it's opening day in the Bronx for the Yankees. So, as someone that has multiple times been like, oh my goodness, fire Aaron Boone, this and that, fire Joe Girardi, all this sort of stuff. I get it. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows especially at places where the goal is to win a championship every year. So, I get it. Even though I don't root for South Carolina, I get it. And I do think last year making it to a super regional definitely extended Kingston's stay here, quite literally, since he got a contract. His contract changed up a little bit. Had he not made it to a super regional last year, I think it would have been easier to say, okay, Mark, we're for Ray Tanner or someone to say, hey, Mark, we're gonna go in a different direction here, because look, you don't go from missing the postseason 2 years ago, finishing under 500 that year in 2022, to getting a contract extension unless you do something really good. And I mean, look, he did make it. He did make it within 2 wins of Omaha. I know that is not good enough for some people. And look, it's tough winning college baseball. I'll say it over and over and over again. It is very hard winning in this sport. It's hard. I think it's harder than football and basketball, in my opinion. It's just there's so much talent in this game, and South Carolina's got a lot of talent, but so do other teams. And they also just happen to play in arguably the toughest conference in America. So there's a lot of things that can prevent them from going further than they would like. Obviously, they're going to have good weekends. They're going to have bad weekends. That's the game. It's a long season for a reason. And I don't think there's any reason to really panic right now, per se. We're about at the halfway point almost. We'll see what happens this weekend with Texas A&M. Obviously, they're number 3 in the country, and if South Carolina wins the series, I feel like everyone's just going to go right back to, oh, I take back my words about Mark Kingston, this and that. It's look, that's what fans do. It's normal. What could send him packing this year? It's tough to say. I think if he gets back to another super regional, I think he's in line to come back for next year. If I don't know if they go 0-2 in the regional, whatever regional they're in, I don't. In my opinion, I don't know if they're gonna be hosting this year. If they go 0-2 in whatever regional they're in and they get eliminated pretty early, I think he gets fired. I think that is probably my worst case scenario answer is that happens. And I don't think they're missing the postseason. I think they're going to get in. I think they're a solid team this year. I'd be shocked if they missed the playoffs this year. That would be very shocking. And plus, let's also think about it this way: if South Carolina somehow makes a big run in Hoover in the SEC tournament, which I know those words, big run, Hoover, SEC tournament, that does not happen around here. South Carolina's luck in that tournament is not usually good. If he somehow made a run in that too, and messed around and maybe got to the championship, South Carolina in a position to win it, maybe that also influences what happens next year. I just think it would take a lot of things to go wrong for him not to be here next year. And if that kind of answers the question there. Got one more question here. Not a lot of questions this week. So again, like I said, if you have a question you want answered on next week's episode, be sure to drop it in the comment section below on this video. Or like I said, I'll have a thread on the Insiders Forum where you can drop any questions you have. Again, I'm trying to answer more than just baseball questions at this point. I feel like I'm trying to get a little broader here because I'm going to try to continue this as into the summer, football season, etc. I think it's really cool to interact with you guys and stuff. So if you have any questions, football, basketball, baseball, softball, I'll answer some softball questions. Maybe some, I don't know. You guys can ask me whatever, and I'll be happy to answer it. So, final question comes from 1M Creek Cock, who asks, Jack, in the preseason, we were getting reports on position battles that made me feel better about the depth on this team. Yet halfway through the season, we have seen the same 10, 11 position players eat up most of the innings. It would be nice to see some other players get some playing time during midweek games, which would also give the starters some rest. Your thoughts? I agree. I think midweek games are the preferred time to go out there and get some other guys in there, right? I think Mark Kingston's done that a little bit here and there. He's given Ryan Bates some starts at catcher. He gave Dalton Reeves his first start as a Gamecock of the year, last week against Presbyterian, and he went out there and hit 2 home runs against his old team. So it's not like guys aren't getting opportunities. And I think, at the same time, you're trying to win games. I think that also needs to be, stated is that your objective is to win. And does South Carolina have the depth to go out there and win games? Absolutely. I totally think they have. I've said it since the beginning of the year. They have the offensive talent to go out there and look, if someone gets hurt or someone needs to sit on the bench for a minute, you can go out there and replace someone. Like, it's normal. I think that's it's definitely and I get it that maybe some guys do need to take a back seat. I think this question is kind of regarding guys like Tippett, Maybe Gavin Casas. I'm trying to think of other guys that have been slumping a little bit, but that's baseball too. Baseball is a game where you're going to struggle more times than not, and it's just about when you can succeed, and if you can, that's great. That means you're doing something right. So I do think at some point other guys do have to get a chance, especially at shortstop. Look, I like Will Tippett. I think he is a nice guy, not a bad baseball player by any means. I just think at some point that offense, man, it's concerning. It's concerning. And I do think his defense and speed make up for it. I think he's the best defender in the infield, to be honest. And he's been awesome over there at shortstop. But at some point, I mean, bunting is only going to go so far for him, I think. And I don't know. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in where you're good at mostly everything else, but your offense isn't really catching up at all. It hasn't caught up at all since he's been here. So maybe at some point something will click. I don't expect him to be on the bench anytime soon. I think Lee Ellis would be the de facto backup shortstop, and then Jordan Carrion hasn't played all year. So let's just assume right now he's not coming to South Carolina. He's not going to be playing at all for the Gamecocks this year. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I do think Lee Ellis deserves a few more reps. Maybe at some point. I mean, maybe not next week or the midweek game against North Carolina. That's a good team right there. Maybe in the future against a smaller level team. It comes to like Winthrop, maybe for instance, in a few weeks or whatever the case might be. I think you can get maybe a guy like Ellis some reps then. But for right now, I think things are going to stay the way they are. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Jack's Mailbag. Again, if you have any questions that you want answered on next week's episode, I'm more than happy to answer whatever y'all want to talk about. After all, this is a show for the fans. If you have a question you want to answer on next week's episode, I'll have a post on the Gamecock Central Insiders Forum where you can ask all your questions that you want to me. And you can also drop a comment on this YouTube video with your question, and I'll make sure to get to it. So without further ado, have a great weekend, guys, and thank you guys so much.